My fellow members of Blue Key annually select a member of the CSE faculty to provide a greeting at Ivy Day. Dr. Kurt Kinbacher, Professor of Social Sciences, is the individual who has been asked to speak this evening. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kinbacher.
Thank you, and good evening. And on behalf of the faculty, welcome. Some of you know me, and you know that I'm a big fan of academic tradition, and Ivy Day is a good one. Alex Helmbrecht, who's the Director of College Relations, did some archaeology. This is the 98th edition of this event. It takes a lot to cancel this event. I think World War II and global pandemic did it a couple times, but we just keep right plugging along. So it's wonderful to be here. Other great academic traditions, well, we get to dress like this. 800 years ago, this is what people wore to school. There's been some changes here, but the hats really haven't changed that much. I haven't decided if they're dysfunctional or afunctional or just uncomfortable. But we'll come back to the hats later on. And many of you think I'm just stuck in tradition, but just know this. I'm in favor of disruptive technology. My costume has a zipper. I've read about zippers in zippershopper.com. They were introduced to boots in 1917 and then made their way onto clothing in 1925, just in time for Ivy Day. But other traditions that you know that I really enjoy in this part of the world is, one of my favorites is Advising Month. It happens, it's true. My other favorite is announcing it at Student Senate. It happens every October, and February is when students meet with their advisors to discuss their plan of study, their course schedule, their future plans. And sometimes when I'm taking a break from grading and doing a walkabout around the building, I hear students in their advisor's office going, why? Why do I have to take World History 1? It's a class that begins at the very beginning of time and proceeds sort of chronologically to somewhere really a long time ago. It's taught in the oldest classroom on campus, in barely legible handwriting on the board, and it never gets erased. It says, no cell phones or earbuds, please. That's disruption. But the question is why, and it's partly so I can tell you about Natufians. That's reason one. Natufians 13,000 years ago were a foraging society in the upper reaches of the Euphrates River Valley, and although they're foragers, they were semi-sedentary. They had giant mortar and pestles, and they'd gather wild grasses, and they'd crush the grass seeds into flour and make, we think, biscuits. And then one day, after 1,000 years of living like that, their worlds became disrupted. We think that the monsoon pattern changed. Instead of dumping rain on Euphrates River Valley, it just kind of stopped at the Himalayas, and they had to do something, so they invented agriculture. And that happened like 8 other times around the planet, not too distant, which led to all sorts of cool disruptions like weaving, so we could dress like this, and zippers. I read about that in the Journal of Archaeology. It was on page 41 in your textbook. But there's other reasons, and I've kind of colluded with some of my faculty members. We've been testing you. We've been testing your endurance, your fortitude, and your stamina. It's like an academic version of the Olympic Games in ancient Greece, or the Heraean Games in honor of Hera for women in ancient Greece, but we kind of cross it with maybe a little bit of the gauntlet from an Iroquoian tradition. It's not a biathlon. It's not a pentathlon, it's not a heptathlon, it's not a decathlon, it's more of a super centathlon. 121-hour individual events that you've been competing in. But there's really even more to it than that. Some of you have longer degrees. You have education degrees. Some of you change your majors once or twice or 3 or 4 times. There were penalty laps. But you kept going. And then, by the magic of alchemy and the authority of Board Policy 4141, we multiplied that all by 3. And you were just cruising around the track because you're good students. There's a whole pile of stuff that says you're good students up here. you're doing so well, we threw up a steeplechase hurdle. When you bounded over that gracefully, the next time around, we lit that steeplechase hurdle on fire and dug out the water trench the size of Lake Walgren and watched you gracefully swim out like a agile muskrat kicking the lake monster in the head, and just kept going and going, and you're almost done. There's just 2 more events for you who are graduating. One of them is just here in a minute. In just a little while, you're going to walk across this stage, and there's a bunch of cultural artifacts over here that suggest that you've been very good students indeed. Now, tomorrow is really the main event, but before we get to that, it's my opportunity to give you some unsolicited advice. But just 2 things tonight. 1, be generous. Disruptions come. You never know when they're going to influence someone. You can just think of the button makers in Muscatine, Iowa. Being generous costs you nothing, and it can do a world of good. And as the ancients knew, what goes around comes around. Number 2, live well. Whatever that means to you. Some of you are going to wander the planet like Herodotus. Some of you are going to sink your roots so deeply into a plot of land that 13,000 years from now, a future archaeologist is going to label you a Neo-Natufian. That brings us to tomorrow. It's like the final event in your academic career, and there's all sorts of traditions. There's going to be a brass band. There's going to be speechifying. There's going to be applause, and maybe a air horn, or a didgeridoo, or a cowbell that goes with it, and there's some more stage walking. But that's just the tradition, that's just pomp and circumstance. The thing to keep in mind tomorrow, it just seems like a simple thing. These hats on your head, the mortar boards that, I can't hardly see you, but they don't look comfortable, do one thing, they hold your tassel. Tomorrow you're going to be asked in unison to move your tassel from one side of your hat to the other. That's the mark that you've arrived, that you've finished this Super Centathlon. Do it with some deliberation, because you have earned a lot here. You've learned things. I'm going to suggest some of the things you've learned you want to unpack for decades in the future. Just take a moment to reflect. So on behalf of the faculty, I thank you. For those of you in 21st century costumes, thank you. Without your support, a lot of these people wouldn't be sitting here today. On behalf of the faculty, for those of you who are on fleek this evening, congratulations and well done. I wish you my heartfelt congratulations, and I shake your hands.